That does it for today. We'll be back with another edition of America Decides tomorrow at 5 p.m. Eastern. The Daily Report starts right now.
Welcome to the Daily Report on October 28th, 2024. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Tonight, the final sprint. The presidential candidates enter their last full week of campaigning. Vice President Kamala Harris heads to Michigan while former President Trump holds a faith summit and rally in Georgia. And both campaigns react to controversial comments made by a comedian at a Trump rally that was dubbed the start of the candidates' closing argument.
The Trump campaign said the remarks do not reflect the former president's views, but the damage may have been done.
It's beneath any president, but that's what we're getting used to. That's why this election is so important.
It is just more of the same and maybe more vivid than usual. Donald Trump spends full time trying to have Americans point their finger at each other.
Last night we had a great rally at Madison Square Garden.
Officers responded to reports of a fire at a ballot box right outside the building that we're in right now.
The Washington Post announcement that it will not endorse a candidate this year or in any future races has reportedly led to thousands of canceled subscriptions and even some resignations.
Two sources familiar with the investigation now telling CBS News dozens from both sides of the political aisle have been targeted by the Chinese government-affiliated group.
I will launch the largest deportation program in American history.
We have seen one estimate that says it would cost $88 billion to deport 1 million people a year.
The response from Israel was limited to military sites, which was entirely appropriate given the nature of the attack by Iran.
CIA Director Bill Burns is back in Qatar to try to restart talks between Israel and Hamas.
Those stories and more tonight. This is the Daily Report. Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report on the campaign trail with just over a week to go until Election Day. Early voting is underway in most states. On Monday, President Biden joined the roughly 45 million people nationwide who have already cast their ballot. Both Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump campaigned in swing states Monday. Harris is focusing on manufacturing jobs in Michigan, while Trump is in Georgia, where he spoke at a roundtable with faith leaders. But it was Trump's Sunday campaign stop that's driving headlines today. Both Democrats and Republicans have come forward to condemn Trump's opening act at his rally Sunday at Madison Square Garden in New York City. Crude comments made by comedian Tony Hinchcliffe upstaged what was meant to be a massive platform for Trump to make his closing argument of the election.
Believe it or not, people, I welcome migrants to the United States of America with open arms. And by open arms, I mean like this. You know, there's a lot going on. Like, I don't know if you guys know this, but there's literally a floating island of garbage in the middle of the ocean right now. Yeah. I think it's called Puerto Rico.
Regarding the Puerto Rico comment, a senior advisor for the former president said, quote, "This joke does not reflect the views of President Trump." The former president did not directly respond to Hinchcliffe's remarks, but made light of some of the language he uses at his rallies.
And sometimes I'll use a little bit, not hard foul, but soft foul. We call it soft foul. But, you know, to emphasize something about somebody's capabilities or whatever I might be talking about. I'm not sure. Every once in a while you need a little bit of something, a little spice to juice them up a little bit.
Before heading to her first stop of the day, Harris paused to call out her opponent's campaign rhetoric as she works to showcase the differences between herself and Trump as part of her final pitch to voters.
He is focused and actually fixated on his grievances, on himself, and on dividing our country. And it is not in any way something that will strengthen the American family, the American worker.
The remarks from Trump's Madison Square Garden rally are reverberating across communities, in particular on Latino voters in the swing state of Pennsylvania, which has a large Puerto Rican population. Here's what one previously undecided voter said Monday when asked about how she made her final decision to vote for Harris.
last 4 years, it was not the best, I would say, for the country. So that had me, I really, not sure which side to pick. And with the comments that happened yesterday, I finally said, no, I have to be in the right side of the history. I need to pick right thing, not only for me, for my family, and for my beloved Puerto Rico.
I'm joined now by CBS News political director Finn Gomez, who was at the Trump rally last night, and CBS News senior White House and political correspondent Ed O'Keefe, who's in Ann Arbor, Michigan, following the Harris campaign. Good evening to both of you, and thank you for being here. Finn, what is the Trump campaign saying about this?
Well, Lindsay, just a little while ago, I confirmed a report that was initially in the Bulwark online publication that said that the sources close to the campaign said that they received a pre-approved list of jokes. They did look at jokes of this comedian in question, and they vetted two questions. They say that had very profane words about women, including one with the C word, and then also they say that the questions that this comedian utilized in the garden in the rally last night were not on the list, and they were ad-libbed. This is, of course, this is per source familiar of last night's rally, involved in last night's rally. But again, this is per this Trump source.
Yeah, and the same was said by senior Trump advisor Brian Lanza to our Major Garrett just moments ago. Not the part about the expletive that this comedian apparently intended to use to describe Harris. But Ed, how is the Harris campaign responding, both publicly and behind the scenes?
Well, even as the Trump campaign apparatus tries to separate itself from what was said, what the Harris campaign noticed overnight into this morning was how quickly this moment, this viral moment now, spread across the Puerto Rican and broader Latino diaspora and became part of the national conversation today as word of it and clips of it spread. There are indications, if you look at the data in Google Trends, that there was more searching done about this incident than there was in the hours after Taylor Swift announced her endorsement of Vice President Harris. Just to give you a sense of recent campaign-related sign of viral moments. The campaign flagged that for us. We checked it out as well, and it appears that gives you some sense of how quickly this was spreading. It has been turned into a campaign ad that is now set to be aired, mostly digitally, targeting Latino and specifically Puerto Rican communities. And ultimately, the campaign and Democrats who are tracking things for them agree where this is likely to have the most impact is with that voter you just played from Philadelphia. Philadelphia, Allentown, Harrisburg. There are pockets of Puerto Rican neighborhoods and communities in that area where thousands of votes are up for grabs. There was big concern among Democrats that Latino men, especially Puerto Rican men in Pennsylvania, would be among those breaking towards the former president, given his policies and his style. They now believe this may have helped stop that potentially, and certainly has at least raised awareness among Latino voters across the country. And this coincided, Lindsay, real quick, with the release of Harris's Puerto Rican sort of policy that she presented last night, timing it to this event, having a feeling that perhaps this might be part of why Trump was in New York to begin with, was to target the city and the region's broader Puerto Rican voting population. It was endorsed by entertainers like Jennifer Lopez, Ricky Martin, and Bad Bunny. That helped amplify it as well. So it's a Trump stumble that the Harris team is exploiting and was able to exploit pretty quickly.
So, Finn, Trump is campaigning in Georgia. It's his 10th time in the battleground state. What tone is he striking on the heels of the MSG rally?
A defined one. I think he's still focusing on his two main critical issues at the heart of his campaign, which is immigration and inflation. Sources close to the campaign tell me that they don't intend to change that, and that will still be his focus in this last stretch. We're, of course, only about a week away, Lindsay, until Election Day.
At Michelle Obama rallied with Harris over the weekend. She made a pitch on reproductive rights, but she made the pitch to men. Let's listen.
Let me warn you, your rage does not exist in a vacuum. If we don't get this election right, your wife, your daughter, your mother, we as women will become collateral damage to your rage.
Why is the Harris campaign choosing this messaging from this political figure at this moment?
Because she wanted to deliver it, and she wanted to deliver it in that battleground state. And what I found most interesting, Lindsay, is she told that crowd I have just delivered this speech. Make sure you send clips of it to your friends and neighbors or to the men in your life, she was saying to the women in the audience. This was designed as well to go viral, but in essence to go viral in a better, more effective way for a campaign than the incident that happened Sunday at Madison Square Garden with the Trump campaign. And it's a message they expect will resonate across the country as women especially make their final decisions and maybe drag along their husbands, their boyfriends, their brothers, their fathers.
Finn Gomez and Ed O'Keefe, thank you. Let's bring in CBS News Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett. Major, thanks for being with us. If Sunday's rally was meant as Trump's closing argument, what is it?
So I think it was meant as the beginning of the Trump closing argument. And as you mentioned at the top of the show, Lindsay, for 45 million or so Americans, the argument's already closed. They've already voted. And that's something we should think about. That's about 28% of the entire turnout in 2020. So for a quarter of our country, this election is already effectively over. But what Trump was hoping to do in Madison Square Garden was to say, hey, I can play the garden. I'm a celebrity. Everyone knows that. What he didn't want was a note of incredibly deep division, which is what he got from this comedian. And that comedian is associated with this rally and therefore associated with the Trump campaign. And they have to own all of the blowback because they put the show on. If the comedian went off and went rogue, quote unquote, as the Trump advisors are now saying, that's their fault. True, because it's their place. It's their venue. They're responsible for everything that comes with it. And the last thing the Trump campaign wanted was to give fodder to the Harris campaign to create digital ads, to create voter outreach, to motivate people who might not have been paying attention to something that they might find something that's not only offensive, but possibly motivating. That's the backdrop of this particular rally. And part of it does not work to the Trump campaign's advantage, and that's putting it mildly.
Trump and J.D. Vance could also come out and disavow these comments. J.D. Vance on the campaign trail today said we're too quick to be offended.
Well, of course, and that is one of the subtexts of the Trump campaign, has been since 2015. What offends people on the left or center left, they find offensive themselves, and they rally Americans to say, we're too snowflakey, we're too sensitive, and we can't win in the world, we can't win on a global stage if we're so sensitive. We need to be tougher, we need to be more aggressive. That is part and parcel of the Trump message, has been for a very long time. Vance echoes that. And that will come with part of their defense for what happened yesterday.
The comedian wasn't the only person to speak at the rally to make a splash, so to speak. Let's go ahead and play part of this from Stephen Miller, Trump's top immigration advisor.
Who's going to stand up and say the cartels are gone, the criminal migrants are gone, the gangs are gone, America is for Americans and Americans only?
America's for Americans is rhetoric that might be reminiscent for some of KKK pamphlets of yesteryear. What is your reaction?
So what the Trump campaign always does with this supremely harsh rhetoric is puts it in a larger context of immigration, talking about cartels. No one in this country is in favor of criminal cartels, not small, not medium, not large. But that rhetoric itself separates that if you listen carefully. America is for Americans. Well, who decides who an American is? Trust me, those who work closest with former President Trump, if they return to the White House and the Department of Homeland Security and Border Patrol and ICE, they will make those determinations. They will decide who an American is and who American isn't. And when the president talks about the larger danger to America coming from within our country than externally, you put those two things together, you have something that many voters will ponder as they come to the decision about where to vote and who to vote in this election.
Major Garrett, really enjoyed your panel at the end of America Decides. Thanks for sticking around for the Daily Report.
Sure.
You can watch Election Night with the CBS News team live from our election headquarters in New York and with our teams spread out across the country. Join us for real-time results, analysis, and exclusive polling. Coverage starts at 4 p.m. Eastern on CBS News 24/7 and continues at 7 p.m. Eastern on CBS. We're learning more about China's alleged efforts to interfere in the U.S. political process. The Washington Post is reporting that a group of hackers linked to the Chinese government collected audio recordings from phone calls of American political figures, including an unnamed Donald Trump campaign advisor. The report comes days after CBS News learned the same hacking group tried to access phones and networks used by former President Trump, Senator and Republican vice presidential candidate J.D. Vance, and members of Kamala Harris's campaign. China's alleged influence operations go beyond just the top of the ticket. Last week, Microsoft accused China of targeting down-ballot Republicans who have been critical of Beijing. Chris Krebs joins us now. He's the former director of the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency and the chief intelligence officer at SentinelOne. He is also a CBS News cybersecurity expert. Chris, good evening. Thanks for being here.
Thanks.
What is the ultimate goal of this kind of surveillance?
Well, this has been chalked up as a espionage effort. What we're seeing is the Chinese going after campaigns to get an inside track on what are some of the policy decisions or positions that the Trump campaign may have and that the Harris campaign may have. They're also looking for personnel decisions. Who are the folks that are going to go into some of the leadership positions in a next administration, so they can start profiling them. They can look for past statements they've made. They can look for compromising information. Again, this is a much more broad espionage campaign. This is not like some of the other things that we've seen out of China lately, known as the Volt Typhoon effort, which is going after critical infrastructure from a disruptive and destructive. This is a classic espionage operation.
I mean, so it's kind of twofold. It's getting information about the policies and the people, but it's also potentially trying to find damaging information and have an influence.
Yes, absolutely. Look, these security services have long-range plans. They are looking for today's information, but they also want to be in a position so down the road they can anticipate, they know where this team may be or the next team may be going, so that they can position themselves well.
How should voters feel about this in the context of the election?
Well, I think this is from an individual, almost consumer level. There is not a direct impact on any individual voter. However, on the overall national security perspective, it is very concerning that the Chinese have upped their game from a effort to compromise our critical infrastructure networks, our telecommunications networks. This is also representative of a significant evolution and maturation in their techniques. The Chinese are very, very good, and they have scale. They have hundreds of thousands of operators that they can put on a problem, and this is something that they are looking to gain any edge they can from a political perspective.
So if they are very good at this, are we good at protecting, both from maybe a campaign level to a government level?
Well, so the campaign piece is something that we've been focused on for the last couple of years, of providing political campaigns where every dollar counts out on the ground game. But providing those resources to campaigns so that they can protect their own networks. They've partnered with technology companies, whether it's Google or Microsoft, over the last couple of years to harden those defenses. From a government perspective, we are pushing the boundary out into Chinese networks to prevent them from trying to launch these campaigns and attacks, to put sand in their gears, so to speak, and disrupt their own operations. But from a bigger critical infrastructure, the private sector perspective, I think we're improving. We're certainly better than we were when I was in the job that Jen Easterly now holds at CISA. And there's still room to grow. And that is what I'm hearing right now out of the U.S. government, is that if it were not for this election, all that we would be talking about, wall-to-wall on the airwaves, would be Chinese aggression in cyberspace and elsewhere.
Wow.
So I expect this to be a top priority for any administration coming in next January.
Okay, Chris Krebs, thank you so much. Always appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Federal investigators are sounding the alarm over potential threats related to the general election. How the government says bad actors are trying to use conspiracy theories to stoke violence and who's being targeted in their plans. Plus, Israel carries out a major raid against suspected Hamas militants in Gaza, where officials say members of the group were hiding. You're streaming the Daily Report.
Come on, Julia. Oh, no. I will if you will. You go, gal. That's right.
Let me see if you can find me.
I want to make sure that my voice is heard, but also that I lift up other voices.
You can't write a better script.
Yeah, boy! It's gonna be a ride.
We'll see you 7 o'clock sharp.
How fast do you think you were going?
195 miles an hour. This is incredible.
How close did you actually come to being killed?
That close.
Is this brain surgery without a knife?
It is.
What risk do these children pose to Russia?
I'm not sure the world is prepared for this change.
Definitely not.
Who's the best coach in college football today?
Let me see a mirror.
It's time for the CBS News original, 60 Minutes. Sundays on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
I'm a voracious consumer of information and constantly curious. I want to know the basic facts of every issue and to press into the heart of the matter. Information is the currency of democracy, and that's what we bring to the table every Sunday.
When you need your sports news all the time,
We've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights
What a finish at the final round of play.
and in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
We're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone,
This could happen to anybody.
and sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Washington Post is dealing with fallout from its decision not to endorse a presidential candidate for the first time in 36 years. In a statement last week, the Post publisher and CEO William Lewis said the paper was returning to its roots by not endorsing a candidate. He added the Post sees this as a, quote, statement in support of our readers' ability to make up their own minds on this, the most consequential of American decisions. Lewis said the Post would not endorse any future presidential candidate either. For more, I want to bring in David Folkenflik. He's a media correspondent at NPR. David, good evening to you. The Post and the union representing its writers say the paper's owner, Jeff Bezos, was the one who made the decision not to publish a presidential endorsement. What more can you tell us about this?
Well, that's absolutely right. And we were able to confirm that when we broke the news slightly ahead of Will Lewis's announcement on Friday. Further reporting has only deepened that. The editorial page editor, David Shipley, had essentially greenlit earlier this fall an endorsement for Kamala Harris for presidency over former President Donald Trump. Why does that make sense? Well, the Post's reporters have spent years documenting, particularly during the Trump presidency, allegations of wrongdoing and even illegality by the president and his associates. The editorial page, which is run separately and obviously overseen ultimately by the publisher and the owner, has declared Trump to be unfit for office repeatedly, and even more so a threat to the democratic experiment in this nation. And yet Bezos said no. He said he wasn't comfortable with endorsing Harris and didn't want to proceed. It has been presented, as you said, by the publisher as a decision to be an independent newspaper, which is a motto and slogan of theirs stretching back decades. But it does seem funny to make this final decision, one that the opinion page editor tried to talk Bezos out of as recently as last week, I'm told, just days before the election that's on a knife's edge.
What is the significance of Bezos making this decision given the Pentagon and NASA contracts that he either wants or has in the works and the timing of this decision?
No, he would say it has nothing to do with it. And to be fair to Bezos, when Trump was in office, he had a lot of business ventures in front of the government worth potentially billions of dollars and didn't flinch from hard-hitting reporting. But right now, as you say, Blue Origin, his space company, has a $3.4 billion contract with NASA. You've got Amazon cloud computing services company, where Trump basically blew up what was expected to be a $10 billion contract for their services with the Department of Defense. Amazon filed suit alleging Trump had interfered. The Pentagon withdrew the contract and then split it up and gave Amazon a piece of it, but it cost them billions of dollars they had anticipated, although not proven that they would have gotten without any political involvement there. So what you see is a guy who's one of the most powerful people in the world, Jeff Bezos, one of the richest, one of the most seemingly insulated from political pressure, just ahead of a political election, saying, I don't want to endorse Donald Trump's opponent. People, including the former legendary executive editor Marty Baron of the Washington Post, who had seen Bezos as an incredible ally of his during his time at the Post, saying this is cowardly, this is spineless, and it will only encourage Donald Trump to try to pressure the Washington Post and other news organizations more vigorously should he get back into office.
So we've been talking about some of the responses, but how are readers and subscribers responding, and do we expect to continue to see more fallout?
Sure. Well, I've been able to report earlier today for NPR that more than 200,000 subscribers canceled their subscriptions in the 3 days since we broke this news and the Post made its public announcement of its decision to pull back from endorsing it all. That's an extraordinary figure. You know, usually if a few hundred people cancel, if a few thousand people cancel, that's a very big deal. It's a way that people who are subscribers who feel an investment, a paid subscription to the Post, that's a real connection. They're severing that connection in that way. Well, to have 200,000, it's 100 times more. It's such a big way of rejecting the Post decision here that it's a problem. It's causing an enormous tumult inside the Post. And separately, as a matter of principle, you're seeing fallout. I've seen we know that 2 columnists have resigned from the Post entirely, 2 members of the editorial page who are writers who help formulate these positions representing the establishment of the newspaper's considered judgment. They have stepped down from their positions on the editorial board, saying that they can't be part of it. At one point, one of those writers said that she felt that Donald Trump was not yet a dictator, but that this helps hasten that day. Another editorial writer who stepped away had been somebody who just won a Pulitzer last week in recognition of his work, talking about how tyrants are able to exercise power and repression in foreign lands.
David Folkenflik, thank you for joining.
You bet.
Israel's military says it detained 100 suspected Hamas militants during a raid on a hospital in northern Gaza over the weekend. Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry says the hospital was heavily damaged. The facility has been struggling to keep up with operations as Israel continues to target hospitals it says are being used by Hamas. Gaza health officials and Hamas have denied these claims. Meanwhile, Lebanese officials say at least 7 people are dead following Israeli airstrikes Monday on the port city of Tyre. The IDF says it targeted Hezbollah anti-tank missile depots and other arms assets there. Here in the U.S., the State Department defended Israel's decision to launch retaliatory strikes against Iran in an overnight attack last week. Iran first attacked Israel on October 1st, strikes that were in response to the IDF's assassination of a Hezbollah commander.
The response from Israel was limited to military sites, which was entirely appropriate given the nature of the attack by Iran. So we do think it was a proportionate response that should not lead to further escalation by Iran, and we certainly hope that Iran will not further escalate the conflict.
Our CBS News polling shows that immigration and the southern border remain key priorities for voters. Up next, our 60 Minutes team went along with ICE for a raid for dangerous undocumented immigrants. Our Camila Montoya Galvez joins us to dive deeper into the policies and how feasible they would be to implement. You're streaming The Daily Report.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
Let 60 Minutes take you on a private tour of the National Archives.
So there may be treasures like this buried in boxes.
Historical secrets from America's past.
So this is original from 1778?
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places. Bright, shiny faces.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Put me in the game, coach.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
The best interviews feel like it's just a conversation with a neighbor.
Hey.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask a question that is the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Here we go.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'll see you in the morning.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
The grief of losing a child is immense. You can't breathe.
After decades of the war on drugs, things have only gotten worse.
Every shipment of fentanyl is a ticking time bomb.
50 times more powerful than heroin.
CBS Reports goes deep into Mexico.
What is your role in the Sinaloa cartel?
To find out why the cartels keep getting stronger and wealthier.
This is a war, but we're not fighting it. Our citizens are dying.
Funding Cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Back to the Daily Report. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Here are some additions to our top stories. Trading platform Robinhood is letting some users place bets on the outcome of the presidential election. Robinhood says it will begin offering contracts to a limited number of American customers. The U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission has tried to legally block election outcome trading, but a federal court ruling in September allowed it. CrowdStrike and Delta Airlines are suing each other over a faulty software update in July that led to worldwide tech issues, including widespread flight cancellations. On Friday, Delta filed a lawsuit claiming the outage disrupted more than 1 million passengers' travel plans and cost the company more than $500 million. On Monday, CrowdStrike announced it also sued Delta Friday, alleging the airline repeatedly refused its help. The United Nations says countries are falling miles short in efforts to curb global warming. A new report shows greenhouse gas emissions reached record highs in 2023. The new data comes just 2 weeks before the UN's COP29 climate summit in Azerbaijan. Police in Oregon have released new photos of a suspect's vehicle in connection with a fire at a ballot box in southern Portland. Authorities say 3 ballots were damaged in Portland, while hundreds were damaged in a separate but connected fire on a ballot box nearby in Washington state. Police believe both cases are linked to a third Washington incident from earlier this month.
We don't know the motive behind these acts. It sounds like a series of 3 at this point. But we do know that acts like this are targeted and they're intentional.
The investigation comes as federal officials raise new concerns about political violence as millions of Americans head to the polls to vote early. CBS News Homeland Security and Justice reporter Nicole Skenga is covering the latest.
The Department of Homeland Security is warning that threat actors are likely to leverage claims of election fraud to drive violence before and after Election Day, and that a contested or close election is likely to heighten the U.S. threat environment. The bulletin published today by DHS's Office of Intelligence and Analysis and obtained by CBS News assesses that individuals are using online forums used by domestic violent extremists to post threats of violence toward election election officials or infrastructure. The bulletin reads in part that many of these online posts are promoting historical narratives about election fraud linked to the use of mail-in ballots or electronic voting machines. And investigators assess that some individuals motivated by that narrative have stated their intent online to intimidate voters or election staff through surveillance of election infrastructure or personnel, including by armed individuals. Now, investigators here also finding some individuals online are now calling for the sabotage of ballot drop boxes, circulating methods on forums typically used by these domestic violent extremists. This after the FBI announced today that they're investigating fires that were deliberately set this morning in drop boxes, ballot drop boxes in Washington State and Oregon. And just last week, Phoenix police arrested a 35-year-old man for allegedly setting fire to a mailbox there, damaging 5 ballots. But the Maricopa County recorder tells CBS News those voters were contacted, and some good news, their votes will be counted.
Nicole Skenga, thank you. Virginia is asking the Supreme Court to reinstate the removal of about 1,600 people from its voter rolls. The state's Republican Governor Glenn Youngkin ordered the removal in what was described as an effort to keep non-citizens from voting. A federal judge blocked it last week, saying there was no sufficient evidence that the purged voters were non-citizens or violated any federal law. Federal law prohibits any large-scale changes to voter rolls 90 days before an election. The Supreme Court has not yet said if it will take up the case. Our CBS polling has shown immigration policy to be one of the top issues for voters this election cycle. Former President Donald Trump says he plans to address it by conducting the largest mass deportation in U.S. history if he's reelected. According to the Department of Homeland Security, there are around 11 million undocumented immigrants living in the U.S. Nearly 80% of them have been in the U.S. for a decade or more. 60 Minutes sat down with Tom Homan, who led immigration enforcement during Trump's presidency, and asked what these mass deportations could look like.
How many people would be deported?
You can't answer that question.
Why not?
How many officers do I have?
Is there a written plan on this?
Not that I know of.
If there's no memo, if there's no plan, is this fully baked?
We've done it before.
CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camilo Montoya Galvez joins us now from Tempe, Arizona. Camilo, break down for us what we know about Trump's mass deportation plans and how he intends to carry them out.
Hi, Lindsay. As part of this reporting with 60 Minutes, we posed that question to Tom Homan, the former ICE official that you mentioned, who is likely to lead this operation if former President Donald Trump retakes the White House and returns to power. President Trump has said as much, that he will bring back Tom Homan if he is elected. And Homan told us that while there is no written memo that he has seen outlining this operation, he has said that he will likely reverse Biden administration policies, Lindsay, that currently limit who ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, can arrest in the interior of the country. Right now, ICE, under Biden administration policy, is largely only arresting immigrants who pose a threat to national security or who are serious felons and serious criminals, as well as immigrants who are crossing the U.S.-Mexico border illegally. Long-standing, unauthorized immigrants who are here illegally but have otherwise not committed any serious crimes are largely not being arrested right now. But that would change under a Trump administration and under Homan's leadership if that obviously materializes. Homan also said, Lindsay, that a second Trump administration would likely resume worksite enforcement. What does that mean? Well, it means that ICE would reinstate the policy of going into workplaces to arrest undocumented workers. That practice has been discontinued by the Biden administration. Separately, top immigration advisor to President Trump, Stephen Miller, has said that the National Guard and the military would be deputized to carry out immigration enforcement to arrest and help ICE deport people, but also to use their assets, airplanes and other transportation assets, to remove people from the United States. Former President Trump has also talked about this idea of invoking a law from 1798, the Alien and Sedition Acts, to remove immigrant gang members without any due process. So all of these ideas, obviously, Lindsay, are bound to face operational, legal, and humanitarian challenges.
Well, Trump's running mate J.D. Vance has said deporting 1 million migrants a year is reasonable. You know, our 60 Minutes colleague Cecilia Vega went on that roundup with ICE for undocumented immigrants with criminal histories. She reported it took a team of more than a dozen officers 7 hours to arrest 6 people. That doesn't include the hours spent searching for them. How much would a deportation of this scale cost, and is it feasible for ICE?
Well, one study by a nonpartisan group, Lindsay, found that if the goal is to deport 1 million unauthorized immigrants per year, that would cost the U.S. government, the federal government, $88 billion in terms of finding detention facilities to detain these immigrants, deportation flights, hiring the sufficient number of agents and support staff to carry this out, because it is not as simple, Lindsay, as finding someone, arresting that person, and then just shipping them out to another country. That person usually is afforded due process and has to have their claim heard in front of a judge. That will require more immigration courts, immigration judges, and support staff. That person has to be detained during the duration of those proceedings. That will require more detention facilities. And of course, they have to be arrested to begin with. And right now, ICE has about 6,000 law enforcement agents, which is, of course, not nearly enough to arrest everyone who is here illegally. And the agency also has only about 41,000 detention beds, which again is not nearly enough to detain everyone who is here illegally in the United States, Lindsay. So this would be a massive surge in resources that would likely have to be allocated by Congress unless the second Trump administration, if that materializes, of course, is able to divert funds from other agencies.
Camilo Montoya Galvez, thank you. Actor Jay Johnston has been sentenced to 1 year in prison for his role in the January 6th Capitol insurrection. Johnston, known for roles in Bob's Burgers and Arrested Development, pleaded guilty in July to a felony count of interfering with law enforcement during a civil disorder. Prosecutors say he used a stolen police shield to block and shove law enforcement officers who were protecting the Capitol during the assault. According to the Justice Department, more than 1,500 people have been federally charged in connection with the January 6th riot. Nearly 1,000 have received formal sentences, and more than 600 have been sentenced to prison time. McDonald's Quarter Pounders will return to menus at hundreds of restaurants after test results ruled out the burger's beef patties as the source of a recent E. coli outbreak. The real source is believed to be slivered onions from a single supplier, according to the FDA. The Quarter Pounders will be sold without onions in affected restaurants in the coming week. The E. coli outbreak has killed 1 person and sickened at least 75 more across 13 states, mostly in the Midwest and mountain regions. As hurricane cleanup efforts continue in North Carolina, tens of thousands of residents remain without drinkable water 1 month later. We'll explain how it's affecting families and businesses and what officials are doing to try to fix the issue. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024? Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7 that is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable.
The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Month after Hurricane Helene devastated North Carolina, residents of Asheville are still struggling to find clean drinking water. The North Fork Reservoir accounts for 80% of the water supplied to Asheville and the surrounding region. Landslides and erosion from Helene's rainfall pushed sediment into the reservoir, turning its 6 billion gallons of water a murky brown color. Tap water coming out of faucets in the affected area is yellow or brown. Health officials say it can be used to flush toilets and take showers, but is not safe for human consumption. Christina Morales wrote a recent piece about the issue and joins us here in studio. She is a reporter for the New York Times. Christina, thank you so much for being here. And I think a lot of people would be shocked to hear 1 month later they still can't drink the water coming out of their taps. How do we get here, and what are officials doing about it?
Sure. So officials have had many challenges with trying to restore the water in the first place. But getting it back to a level that is safe to drink has been even worse. So during the hurricane, the sediment and silt and sand essentially rose to the top of the reservoir. And on top of that, there were mudslides. And so that brought in more sediment into the water. So officials are trying to treat that several different ways. One is through using coagulants, which would essentially bind all of the particles together to sink it to the bottom and then have the water be much clearer. The other way that they're going to try, probably this week, is through using curtains to essentially section off the lake about 500 feet radius and then treat it that way.
I mean, a lot of us probably take for granted turning on the tap and just having water come out and not have to worry about it. It's not yellow or brown. What is the real world impact for people who live and work there?
Right. So a lot of residents that I spoke with talked about how interesting it has been and to essentially flip everything that they have known. They're essentially going to water distribution sites, disaster relief sites to be able to take showers, wash clothes, and also to pick up drinking water on a day-to-day basis. They say that it has totally upended their lives, and it has not been something that they've ever gone through before.
Well, I mean, and you also interviewed a couple of Airbnb owners, and I mean, have they been able to even operate right now?
No, many businesses have actually just started the reopening process. So for a bed and breakfast, for example, they are not able to operate because they don't have drinking water yet. They would like to open, they would like to essentially bring back a well into their area and be able to use that as an emergency backup.
What are people telling you about whether they're okay with the response? Look, we get it, it's complicated, or do they think that more can be done? And do we have like a set date or a goal for when they might be able to start drinking their water again?
Yeah, the water, the drinking, essentially restoring the drinking water has been so difficult that officials can't offer a timeline yet.
Wow.
They are very hopeful in this process with the curtains that could make some difference. But for the majority of the residents that I spoke with, they're actually fairly happy that they have running water so early, that they're able to take showers again if they'd like to at home, flush their toilets, which was a really big challenge. And they said that they acknowledged, the challenges that officials had in restoring the water in the first place. On the flip side of that, there are many residents that were unhappy with FEMA and from the initial response from officials, essentially relying on volunteers right after the storm to get food, water, and be able to get through the streets again.
Christina Morales, I encourage everybody to read your article. Just heartbreaking for those people, but we know you'll stay on top of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
What's your sign? Your political sign, that is. One expert explains how a potential match's political views are becoming an increasingly important question to ask while picking a mate. We've got tips for how you can navigate love and politics. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking.
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
Innovative and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright, shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Modern dating can involve a lot of swiping left or right, but now the question of whether someone's values lean left or right can mean more to daters. A dating expert told CBS News that political views are becoming more important when looking for a partner, despite it being a traditionally taboo topic for a first date. That's because many identity-defining issues have become increasingly politicized, including race, gender, and sexual orientation. So here are some expert tips for subtly figuring out your date's views without directly bringing up politics. Observe their behavior and how they interact with others. Ask questions that shed light on values and share your own life experiences. Seems like you would do that on a date anyway, but music buffs will soon have the opportunity to buy pieces of rock and roll history. Julian's Auctions is planning to sell more than 1,000 items, including George Harrison's guitar from the 1950s, guitars signed by Eddie Van Halen and Eric Clapton, and Freddie Mercury's hat. The auction will be held online and at the Musicians Hall of Fame in Nashville on November 20th and November 21st. It is expected to fetch up to $40 million in total. Call Me By Your Name? A Timothée Chalamet lookalike competition in New York this weekend took an unexpected turn when the actor himself crashed the event. The Dune star surprised hundreds of spectators who showed up for the contest in Washington Square Park in Lower Manhattan, briefly even posing for photos. Unfortunately, the event's organizers did not get proper clearance to hold the event there, and they were slapped with a $500 fine before the parade of Chalamets relocated to a different park. It was a tough competition, but in the end, Staten Island student Miles Mitchell, dressed as Willy Wonka, took home the crown as the #1 Chalamet, along with a $50 prize. A goal, home run, slam dunk, and touchdown could all happen in one night Monday during a rare sports equinox. For the 31st time in history, all 4 major sports will play games on the same day. And this sports equinox is a big one, starting with Game 3 of the World Series between the Dodgers and Yankees. In the NFL, the Giants and the Steelers square off in prime time, and in both the NBA and NHL, early regular season games will take place. Sports fans take advantage. This will be the only sports equinox of the calendar year. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering on our next hour. Vice President Harris and former President Trump launch a week of closing arguments with Election Day fast approaching. We'll check in on the state of their campaigns. Plus, hackers linked to the Chinese government reportedly target major political figures to meddle in the U.S. election. We'll dive into the scope of what impact such efforts could potentially have. And a major newspaper breaks with tradition and decides not to endorse a presidential candidate. More on how the timing of the move is sparking a larger conversation about politics and the media. You're streaming CBS News.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that? Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
Is
that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean? What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount Plus.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish that you and I are going to have.
Yep.